And we start international business with breaking news coming in from the United States, where railroad companies and unions, which represent tens of thousands of workers, have reached a tentative deal to avoid a strike. This is according to a statement released by U.S. President Joe Biden's office just moments ago. The agreement now heads to union members for ratification votes, which is standard procedure in labor talks. Workers have agreed not to strike before the vote is tallied. Now, rail workers in the U.S. were protesting against the fact that they have gone without a raise for 3 years, while rail companies have recorded fat profits. The companies include Union Pacific, Berkshire Hathaway, and Norfolk Southern. The U.S. state of California has taken Amazon to courts for violating competition law with practices that prevent sellers from offering lower prices elsewhere. Now, the lawsuit against Amazon from America's most populous state says the company's activities have hurt rivals and made online shopping more expensive. Amazon, on the other hand, says it takes pride in the fact that it offers low prices across a broad selection and that it reserves the right to not highlight uncompetitively priced offers. Although the lawsuit is restricted to California, its impact could be far-reaching. Away from North America, 5 of China's largest banks have cut personal deposit rates. This is according to information available on the mobile apps on the country's top lenders. The banks, which include the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, the world's largest bank by assets, cut interest rates paid on 3-year term deposits by 15 basis points. The move is expected to ease pressure on the margins of Chinese banks after they were hit by cuts in benchmark lending rates. Taiwan's president has warned that the semiconductor industry, which includes computer chips, is facing new and volatile challenges. This comes on the back of the United States' decision to restrict chip exports to China. The president hinted that uncertainty around supply chains, a drop in global consumer demand, and the Ukraine war were challenges the industry is currently dealing with. Taiwan is home to the world's largest chip maker and is a major producer of semiconductors used in everything from washing machines to fighter jets. Oil fluctuated as traders grappled with concerns about global demand and assessed comments from the U.S. on refilling strategic reserves. WTI swung between gains and losses before trading little changed above $88 a barrel, while China's Chengdu plans to ease lockdown measures in parts of the city later on Thursday, and this is aiding consumption. But the International Energy Agency has warned that China is on course for the biggest annual drop in oil demand in more than 3 decades. You're watching Business Edge. When we come back, South Africa could be on the verge of another devastating strike if workers in the automobile industry do agree to some negotiations. We'll have the details after this. The automobile industry in South Africa is on the knife's edge at the moment, as another strike could be called at any time. Trying to avoid another face-off, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, NUMSA, has met with employers in the motor sector, including the Retail Motor Industries and the Fuel Retail Association, under the umbrella of the Motor Industries Bargaining Council. The labor group and employers' representatives met earlier this week. But there seems to be no headway yet, despite NUMSA starting negotiations with motor employees, or rather employers, I beg your pardon, since April 2022. There have been more than 5 sessions, but no agreement has been reached. Joining me from South Africa is NUMSA's national spokesperson, Phakamile Hlubi-Majola, and she's going to take us through some of the issues that could be bringing another strike on South Africa. Phakamile, welcome once again to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining me. Straight into this now, what's bringing NUMSA back to the position of possibly calling another strike?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. The reason that NUMSA is on the verge of a strike in the motor industry is because we've not been able to find one another. We have been engaging with the motor sector since as you said, since April this year, and unfortunately, we've not found each other, even though the agreement in the sector expired at the end of August of this year. And the offer that is currently on the table is an offer of 4%, and that's coming from the Fuel Retailers Association. We are looking for 9 to 9.5% because we're looking for a meaningful increase for the lowest paid workers who are workers in the garage sector.
All right. So, what are the issues that are really bringing you back? Because you've talked about looking for an increase for the lowest workers. We know that things are challenging globally around the world right now. What also makes us think that these are employers that can afford to give some of the increases that are being requested at this time?
We think that the motor industry can certainly do just a little bit more to come closer to what our demands are. We initially came into these talks demanding 12%. We've reduced from 12% to 9%, 9 to 9.5%. This is a sector which represents workers in petrol garages, in garage dealerships, components companies, and the lowest paid worker in that sector are garage workers who are earning the lowest of which is earning 21 Rand an hour. The offer that we have is one of 4%. And the problem there is that we're talking about a rate that will not have a meaningful impact, certainly on the person who's earning 21 Rand an hour. We think that we can find each other. We just think that as a union and as unions, we've gone very far in compromising. And yet on the side of the employer, there's only been one position, and that position has been 4%. And this is why we're saying that we think that if we were engaging and if the employers were engaging us with a view to resolving this, they would certainly try and meet us or try and shift a little bit more than what they have shifted up until this point.
All right. So you mentioned the fact that the lowest paid worker earns 21 Rand per hour. South Africa's minimum wage is 20. While this is just a very small, very, very small difference, some would say that's already putting workers in the industry above the national average. What's your response to that?
South African minimum wage currently is actually around 21 Rand.
Okay.
And in terms of the new rates that were gazetted earlier this year, but on our side, as we said, you can talk about it and try and justify it through the national minimum wage, but it is a reality that this 21 Rand an hour is not a rate that is a living wage. As a trade union, that has always been our position, that government's position on the national minimum wage is one that we would describe as poverty wages. And this is why we say that we believe the sector can do a little bit more. For example, these are workers who work during very awkward hours. They come in very early in the morning, they knock off very late at night, and they don't even have access to transportation. They can't even afford to pay for transportation just to cover them for the month. So, I mean, we must be realistic also about how and what kind of salaries that we pay in this country. Are these salaries that people can live on, or are these salaries that are making people poorer? And what we're experiencing, not just in this sector, in the motor sector, but in many sectors in South Africa, because of the long history of colonialism and racism, is that when it comes to African workers, the salaries are extremely, extremely low and are at such a low rate that workers and their families can barely live on them. And as a union, we feel we have a responsibility, certainly in post-apartheid South Africa, to rectify that social economic problem.
So let's widen this conversation, because South Africa has one of the most comprehensive collective bargaining systems that we see on the continent. But we also see many times that the unions often resort to going on strike in order to push their demands. Is there something wrong with the system that's supposed to be in play? As you mentioned, NUMSA has been in conversations or attempting conversations since April, knowing that there would be an expiration of the previous or the latest contract by August. But since that time, there's really been no headway. So is it that the system that's supposed to offer employees and employers an opportunity to renegotiate every couple of years, whether it's yearly, every 3 years in some cases, is simply not working?
Yes, we definitely would agree that there's a problem with the system. We would ideally not want to be right where we are actually in the month of September, and there's no agreement, and there's the wage agreement has not been settled. And this is actually one of the things that we highlighted very early on in the talks. It's actually part of the reason why we deadlocked in the motor sector in the first place, because the employers waited literally until the 11th hour before they even made an offer. So we were meeting all the way as far back as April, but they only made an offer somewhere around August, if I'm not mistaken. And that already is a reflection on the kind of attitude that we have to deal with when it comes to talk sometimes, where employers don't take or don't see the urgency in what we are doing, and are not thinking about how the delays in these negotiations have a direct impact on workers. Certainly in the case in the motor sector right now, our members are anxious. This is a month when they're expecting increases. Unfortunately, increases are not forthcoming. And what is even more painful for them is that they are now having to contemplate the possibility of participating in a strike. And in South Africa, when workers embark on a strike action, they lose salaries for every single day that they are embarking on a strike. So it really isn't an ideal situation for us as a union. We would prefer to settle this amicably without going on strike, but it has become very sad that when it comes to collective bargaining in South Africa, instead of employers working harder and doing more to try and resolve talks, they, in many cases, it almost comes with a level of arrogance or disdain with which they treat these talks and with which they treat workers. They almost choose the more difficult option, and that for us is very painful. So we've been warning, and we continue to warn. Certainly in this sector, this is a sector that's dominated by small and medium enterprises. And in August, we actually issued a statement calling on companies that own these small mom and pop businesses to put pressure on the FRA and the RMI, the employers in this sector, because it seemed to us that the big players don't care about the possibility of a strike, even though it's actually the smaller players and workers who are really going to suffer. So we continue to call on them to come back to the table, make an offer that is more meaningful. We are not a trade union that cannot compromise. We definitely can compromise. But we believe that these companies can do more than what they're offering currently at the moment.
All right, so let's talk about that offer before we wrap things up. As you said, it's right now, just to confirm, it's only the Fuel Retail Association that's made an offer, and that offer is about 4% across board for the duration of the 3-year agreement. You haven't heard from the others. NUMSA has come down from its initial demand of about 12% to around 9 to 9.5%. It's because it's you I have right now, but the question will go, how much lower is NUMSA willing to go? What's the red line that NUMSA is not willing to cross when it comes to this negotiation?
I don't want to preempt what a settlement figure would be, because that is something that our members and the negotiations teams sort of thrash out during the process. But what I can say is the burning issue would be to finally resolve this issue of transport allowance for petrol garage workers. These are workers who work very awkward hours. Most of them are earning below the official minimum wage, and they spend the majority of their money just paying for transport, because they knock off very late and they start their shifts very early. And we have been making this particular demand now for several years, and it's a demand that sadly employers have just ignored, pretending as if they are unaware of the problems that we have in this country in relation to unreliable and unsafe transport at awkward hours. So if we could find compromises on this burning issue and other, the other issues, we think we could be able to find one another. But this would be determined by a shift in attitude, where the employer needs to come back to the table and really work with us to find a compromise that would work for both sides.
So are you looking at an agreement across the industry, or can you take it employer by employer with the union?
No, because these are talks that are happening in terms of the umbrella sort of bargaining forum, which is the Motor Industries Bargaining Council, and we are a party to that council, so we negotiate within that forum. So we would have to find each other in this national structure, and then that agreement would then be gazetted and extended to all other companies that fall under the motor sector.
All right, Phakamile, before I let you go, are your members ready to go on strike? If whether there are no more offers that at least seem like the employers have decided to move forward and meet you somewhere in the middle, or if the demands that you've made so far are not met?
We are in the process of mobilizing our members. Branch general meetings are taking place. National Shop Stewards Council meetings are taking place over weekends as well, where we are just updating members and informing them of the situation that we find ourselves in. Our members will be the ones to give us the go ahead in terms of when they want to pursue this action. But as a union, we continue to call on employers to come back to the table. We don't have to resort to strike action. We do believe that if we were to engage one another meaningfully, we could find each other without having to resort to strike.
All right, Phakamile, thank you so much for your time today. We'll be, of course, in touch and see how things play out. Hopefully, it won't get to that point, but whatever the updates are, we're ready to discuss them with you as well. Thank you. And South Africa's automobile industry is one of the most developed on the continent. There are thousands of jobs that are potentially on the line. And as my guest has said, for every single day of the strike, workers will not get paid. It's a situation that many will hope does not happen now, given the economic situation of South Africa and what it could mean for unemployment as well as the country's GDP. You're watching Business Edge. Up next, we're wrapping things up with NC4 to watch. And to stories we're keeping our eyes on now, we start in West Africa, where the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry has warned that Africa's largest economy is heading for stagflation as inflationary pressure, foreign exchange challenges, and weak revenue generation have severely strained the economy. The Chamber's Director General, Chinyere Almona, said that stagflation chances were high, despite the economy recording an impressive recovery from the recession induced by COVID-19 in 2020. It is expected that South Africa's central bank will raise its key interest rates by 75 basis points next week to break inflation, adding another 25 basis points in each of the following 2 quarters before pausing for the rest of 2023. In East Africa, the Kenya Electricity Generating Company has finally embarked on geothermal drilling in Djibouti after close to 1 year of studies and exploration. Under the 0.7 billion Kenyan shillings project, the power generating company is set to drill 3 geothermal wells in the country on behalf of the Djiboutian Office of Geothermal Energy Development. The project is the 3rd mega geothermal drilling contract that KenGen is implementing on the continent. And finally, the UK has demanded that its exports to Kenya be exempted from the newly raised East African Community Tax charges that took effect on July 1st. Posing a big problem for Nairobi, which is bound by the regional bloc's decisions. Trade Principal Secretary Johnson Weru said that the UK demands that Kenya abide by the provisions of an economic partnership agreement signed between the two nations is a request that, if granted, could trigger similar demands from other nations. And that's the business we have for you right here on Business Edge. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Download our mobile app. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, watch us on the platforms we are available. You can watch us live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and several others. Until next time, I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun. Do have a fantastic day.